This is Arabian Scent Files, the only fragrance series that treats Middle Eastern perfumery as a subject worth studying, not just a place to find cheap alternatives. Every episode goes deeper than the bottle. I'm Chizaba, let's get into it. If you are joining from part one, welcome back. And if you are starting here, go watch part one and also episode one first because it provides some context and background into what we're diving into in episode two, part two. So, in part one, I told you about a birthday gift I kept for 5 years without knowing who made it. It was a bottle of perfume from my brother. I did not know the brand, I did not even know the name of the perfume. Well, today we are going inside the perfume house that made it. I now know the name of the perfume. It is Fakar Gold. I now know the perfume house it came from. It is Lattafa. And so I've spent the last 16 months diving into the perfume house that is Lattafa. And one of the things I've discovered is that the conversation the fragrance community is having about Lattafa honestly is not wrong. It's just incomplete. And so incomplete that it might as well be wrong. And incomplete information is almost always more dangerous than no information at all. And that's because you think you understand something when actually you only understand one small corner of it. So far, the broad understanding of the perfume house that is Lattafa is a corner, and today we're expanding that corner. Dubai, United Arab Emirates, 2013. One of the most fragrantly rich cities on the planet, launches a new perfume house, not for tourists or export markets, but for the people who live there. People who have been wearing fragrance for their entire lives and know exactly what good fragrance smells like. That house is Lattafa, and that context changes everything. Let's start with the name because the name is a statement, and we talked about this in part one as well. Lattafa comes from the Arabic root latif, which means gentle, elegant, refined. Al Latif is one of the names of God in the Islamic tradition, and it means the subtly kind, the one who is aware of the finest details. I believe that a house that names itself after kindness and attention to detail is telling you something about what it intends to build before you even smelled a single bottle. They were founded in 2013. It's been more than a decade now. And in that decade, they've built something that most fragrance houses with far more time and far more resources have never managed to build. They've made the essence of Arabian perfumery accessible to everyone. And the word accessible, unfortunately, in the fragrance world now means cheap, inferior, lower quality, less than. You hear the word accessible and it makes you lower expectations before you even open the bottle of perfume that's described that way. With Lattafa, that's not what accessible means. Accessible means the quality is there. Accessible means the ability to smell good, to feel important, to mark the occasions that matter, to be part of the fragrance conversation without having to sacrifice your quality of life or honestly investing hundreds and hundreds and thousands of dollars to do it. Accessible means being able to buy a few different fragrances, one for Tuesday, one for Sunday, one for the days that feel significant, one for the casual days, without it being a major strain on your budget. Because here is what the fragrance industry does not say out loud. More often than not, fragrance gets marketed as something exclusive, something that requires a specific income bracket, something that separates the people who can afford the real thing from the people who cannot. And to me, looks like Lattafa's goal or vision from the very beginning has been everybody deserves to smell extraordinary. Everybody deserves to explore. Everybody deserves to craft something that is uniquely theirs across any economic spectrum. And that is a philosophy that I think is really cool. It is also the lens through which Lattafa, the perfume house, makes sense. Something that is always overlooked is exactly where they started, the region where they started, in the Gulf. In the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, that area, fragrance is not a finishing touch. We talked about this, I believe, in episode 1 as well. It is not something you wear to get a compliment. It is not a luxury that's reserved for special occasions. It is part of getting dressed, part of the everybody's identity. It is part of arranging the house. It is part of setting the atmosphere every single day. I grew up watching my dad never leave the house without spraying something. He had a whole system: bathroom cabinet fragrances, drawer fragrances. Each one had its own occasion and mood. He didn't have a lot, but fragrance was not an afterthought in our house. It was a decision, a daily one. He never left the house without putting something on. And Gulf consumers grew up the same way. Fragrance as identity, fragrance as a daily essential. Children growing up around oud burning in their home, families with signature fragrance profiles that are passed through generations, even offering fragrance to a guest as a gesture of honor and welcome. And here is where I think the way the Western fragrance market talks about fragrance is off or a bit wrong. Fragrance is sold as something you wear for other people, so they notice you, so you get the compliment, so you make the impression. But that is missing the most important part, and that's you. What fragrance does for you, how it makes you feel, how it helps you to set the mood you want for the day or reflect the mood you're already in, how it makes your space feel like yours, how it reflects who you are, not just in how you smell, but in how your home smells, how your clothes smell. I think that understanding fragrance as something that's deeply personal, internal, fragrance as ammo you put on for yourself before you put it on for anyone else. I think that's unique to the Gulf culture, and that is the tradition Lattafa was built inside of. And that is exactly why you cannot judge a Lattafa fragrance the way you judge a Western luxury house. They are not operating from the same philosophy. They never were. Lattafa distributes to over 50 countries worldwide. They have won fragrance industry awards. They are taken seriously by professional perfumers and industry insiders. The gap between how the industry sees Lattafa and how the internet sees Lattafa, now that is the whole conversation. And so let's see if we can close the gap a little bit. Let's talk about what Lattafa actually makes, because this gets interesting. Here is what most people do not know about Lattafa. They do not make one kind of fragrance. They make 4 different kinds of fragrances, 4 distinct categories that serve 4 completely different purposes and different occasions. And the reason most people think Lattafa is just a dupe house is because they only ever discovered one of those categories. They saw one lane, assumed it was the whole road, and then just stopped there. So let's explore the entire road. We'll start with lane 1, the signature Arabic collections. This is Lattafa at its most culturally specific. These perfumes, or this category of perfumes they make, are oud forward, they are rich, they are complex, they are rooted in Gulf fragrance tradition. These fragrances are not reaching toward anything Western, they are not inspired by anything else. They are expressions of a fragrance language that existed long before Western perfumery did. Perfumes like Opulent Oud, perfumes like Opulent Oud Blue, Dokhan, Kamra Kawa. These fragrances live here. They are built from ingredients that Arab traders were moving across the incense route 2,000 years ago. Oud, rose, amber, frankincense. Notes that have been significant in that part of the world since before France had a perfume industry. When you spray something from this lane or category of perfumes, you're not smelling a copy of anything. You are smelling a tradition. One of the bottles in this lane is the reason I now understand what Middle Eastern fragrance actually is at its core, not just intellectually, but in my memory. And we'll get there in part 3. Lane 2, the designer alternative range. And yes, the lane exists. I'm not going to pretend like it does not. I covered what designer alternative means in episode 1, and I'm not diving into the whole thing, but I want to be clear, it is a legitimate lane, a real business model, and Lattafa does it well. Well, maybe I need to explain a little bit. To me, a dupe is an exact copy of something else, and a designer alternative is inspired by, but not exactly. So you can have a perfume that shares similar notes or can grace the similar occasion as something else. It's inspired by it, but are not exactly the same thing. And so in this lane 2, in the designer alternative range, that's where you have fragrances like Abied Rouge that inspired by the BR540 family. Openly so. Professional perfumers, real ingredients, real craftsmanship, just at a different price point. And that is what a designer alternative is. And it's one lane. So that's the second lane. Lane 3, the modern floral and gourmand range. These fragrances are not particularly Middle Eastern in character. They are modern, they are wearable, accessible. You have soft florals, warm gourmands, creamy vanillas, and they happen to be made by a Gulf perfume house with Gulf craftsmanship at Gulf prices. So perfumes like Her Confession lives in this lane. Lattafa Angam lives here. And here's the thing about this lane that I think matters most. I said earlier that the most important part of the fragrance is you, what it does for you, how it makes you feel when the only audience is yourself. And this is the lane you go to for that. They are typically not performance fragrances. They are not fragrances you wear to be noticed. They are fragrances you wear because of how they make you feel when you are alone in a room and you smell your own wrist and something just settles. Most people who discovered Lattafa through the dupe conversation never really think to look here. And they are missing some of the best work this house does. And then there is lane 4, the last lane. That's the city and the travel collection. So you have London, City of Contrast, New York, City of Dreams as examples. This one I find genuinely interesting. Western fragrance houses have been making Middle Eastern inspired fragrances for decades. They look east and imagine what the Middle East smells like and put it in a bottle. In this collection, Lattafa looked west. A Middle Eastern house making fragrances about London and New York and Paris. Imagining those cities the same way Western houses have always imagined theirs. And I think that's really interesting. It deserves a lot more attention than it's gotten. And so we've looked at 4 lanes in one house. Traditional Arabic compositions, rooted in a tradition that predates Western perfumery. Designer alternatives that speak a similar language to luxury fragrances at a fraction of the price. Modern florals and gourmands that exist entirely on their own terms. And city collections that turn the gaze around, a Middle Eastern house looking west, the way Western houses have always looked east. I think that's the full picture of Lattafa, and most people have only ever seen one corner of it, or might have seen everything and just lumped it into one thing without knowing they are very 4 distinct categories. And now I want to talk about what Lattafa does brilliantly and something I think they need to hear. So if anybody knows how to get in touch with Lattafa, send this to them, clip this portion and send it to them. What does Lattafa do brilliantly? They make beautiful, complex, diverse perfumery accessible to everybody. If you want a gourmand, Lattafa has it. If you want a floral, Lattafa has it. You want something deeply, purely Middle Eastern, Lattafa has it. Something that sits in the same family as a designer fragrance you love, Lattafa has it. All of it at a price point that does not ask you to choose between a fragrance and a bill. And that is a genuinely generous thing to do as a perfume house, to say the beauty of this tradition should not be locked behind a price tag most people cannot reach. Everyone deserves to smell extraordinary, and I respect them enormously for it. And because I respect them, I'm going to tell you where I think they fall short. Lattafa releases way too many fragrances. Every year, more releases, more launches. And honestly, after a while, it starts to feel like some of what they're releasing is just a version of something they've already made before. Like every time I dig through Amazon or a fragrance site, I find a new Lattafa perfume I've never heard of. And honestly, it gets exhausting trying to keep track of the number of new releases every single year. Like there are multiple, almost feels like they release a new perfume a day. I mean, it's not that much, but it's so frequent and so often. And I think that strategy of always releasing something new is part of what has fed the dupe house reputation they have. Not just the designer alternative lane, but the sheer volume. When you release that many fragrances that fast, people stop shopping or stop stopping to appreciate what is actually there. Everything starts to blur together. It's, well, this is the new one. There isn't time to sit and appreciate what's already there. It's just a brand new something every single time. And honestly, it pushed me to other houses. Not because I've stopped loving Lattafa. I still own a lot of Lattafa fragrances. But because I needed to press pause. And I do not think a house that makes genuinely beautiful fragrance should be losing people that way. What I'm saying is, Lattafa, slow down. Pay attention to what you have, because what you have is extraordinary. So if you've never bought a Lattafa fragrance and you are watching this wondering where to begin, here's what I will tell you. Start with the Gourmands, specifically the vanilla-based Gourmands. Not because the other lanes are not worth exploring, they absolutely are, but the Gourmand range is where Lattafa is the most approachable. It's warm, it's accessible, the easiest place to fall in love with a house before you go deeper. And when you get there, do not buy something because someone told you it smells like something expensive. Buy it because you want to smell it for itself. Lattafa has honestly earned that. Their fragrances deserve to be chosen on their own terms. Explore the Gourmands, get comfortable with the house, then go toward the oud compositions, then the florals, then the things that challenge you a little. Earn the complexity. Start where the welcome is the warmest and then go from there. And the welcome at Lattafa, it's honestly, it's warm. So in part 3, we'll go into specific bottles. 5 of them, 5 completely different things this house is capable of. Including a fragrance that introduced me to a note that I had been smelling my whole life without knowing its name. And a fragrance I will never wear, but I will never stop keeping. Part 3 is where everything we talked about today becomes something you can actually smell. And so I will meet you there. And when episode 2 is done, episode 3 is something I've been looking forward to since we started this series, because there is one ingredient that comes up in almost every Middle Eastern fragrance conversation. One ingredient that has shaped its tradition for 15th century. One ingredient that costs more than anything else in perfuming. And it does not even grow in Arabia. Episode 3, we'll talk about oud. Episode 2, part 3, let's dive into some bottles. If you've gotten anything from this part, make sure you subscribe so that you know when subsequent parts and episodes go up. If you've missed anything, go back and take a look at the prior episodes. And there will be a written roundup on my blog. So subscribe so you don't miss anything. See you there.